predator becomes prey in the Florida Everglades.
Something is out there in the Florida swampland that has quietly rewritten every assumption scientists held about what belongs at the top of the food chain. Burmese pythons are now being swallowed whole. A new predator has moved in, and biologists are still scrambling to understand what it means. This is the new predator swallowing pythons whole in Florida, and the footage is genuinely unsettling. December 2022. Big Cypress National Preserve. Ian Bartosik, wildlife biologist at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, is following a radio signal through sawgrass and cypress shadow. Then the signal stops moving, a nearly 15-foot female Burmese python coiled in the undergrowth, actively consuming an adult white-tailed deer. The act itself, mid-swallow, a 77-pound deer disappearing into a 115-pound snake. By the time Bartosik's team arrives, roughly half the deer is already gone. The other half vanishes in about 30 more minutes. Burmese pythons had turned up in necropsies with deer fragments before. Biologists suspected it, but suspecting something and watching it happen are entirely different categories of knowledge. Bartosik put it plainly, "It feels like we caught the serial killer in action." That phrase carries weight. Serial killers are not rare offenders who slipped through once. They operate repeatedly, invisibly, within a system that failed to notice until the evidence became impossible to ignore. What made this moment more than a dramatic field observation was the question it quietly opened. Bartosik wasn't out there hunting pythons that day. He was tracking one, and the question of what exactly had been tracking them back. That story hadn't started yet. Conservative estimates now place the Burmese python population above 100,000 individuals, spread across more than 1,000 square miles of South Florida habitat. That is a landmass roughly twice the size of Los Angeles County, patrolled by an animal that can exceed 17 feet, ambush silently, and swallow prey whole without triggering any monitoring system. The ecological consequences arrived faster than anyone projected. USGS-linked research tracking. Everglades National Park between 1997 and 2012 documented one of the most severe mammal collapses in North American history. Raccoon populations dropped 99.3%. Opossums fell 98.9%. Bobcats, predators themselves, declined by 87.5%. Marsh rabbits, cottontail rabbits, foxes, functionally gone from python-dominated zones. An entire prey community quietly erased. But here is what the numbers alone cannot explain. If pythons had dismantled the food web this thoroughly, something should have been pushing back. Something with a large enough appetite and a complete lack of hesitation. And in 2021, Bartosik's team started picking up a signal that suggested something was. In 2021, Bartosik's team at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida began surgically implanting radio transmitters into juvenile Burmese pythons. The goal was straightforward: follow the juveniles, and they'd eventually lead researchers to breeding aggregations of adults. Then, 3 of those animals went quiet. Not silent. The transmitters kept pulsing, but the signal stopped moving the way a python moves. And here's what made it genuinely strange. The pulses weren't dead. They were drifting. Slow, rhythmic displacement consistent with something else's breathing, something else's digestion. The transmitters were still transmitting. They were just doing it from inside another animal's stomach. When the team ran x-rays on one recovered carcass, the image was difficult to process. An intact python spine still curled, sitting inside a second creature's body cavity. The python hadn't been torn apart or scattered. It had been swallowed whole. That detail matters more than it might seem. Tearing prey apart is what most large predators do. Swallowing it entire, a juvenile python, still intact, vertebrae still in sequence, requires something with a jaw architecture and a hunger that operates by completely different rules. 3 animals, 3 signals drifting from inside an unknown stomach. The question was no longer whether something was hunting pythons. The question was, what, exactly, had enough gape to take them in one piece? That question, what has enough gape to swallow a juvenile python whole, turns out to have a very specific, measurable answer. To understand it, you need to understand what a python's jaw actually is. Unlike your lower jaw, which is a single rigid bone locked at the chin, a python's lower jawbone comes in two separate halves, connected at the front by an elastic ligament that stretches. The upper skull flexes independently. Every joint in the system moves outward simultaneously, turning the mouth into something closer to an expandable sleeve than a fixed opening. Researchers call the resulting measurement the snake's gape. And it is, effectively, the hard ceiling on everything a python can consume. Now, the deer Bartoszek watched disappear into that 15-foot female was not a small animal. It weighed 77 pounds. The snake weighed 115. What Professor Bruce Jane's October 2024 study in reptiles and amphibians calculated was staggering. That deer represented 93% of the python's maximal gape area. The snake was operating almost exactly at its anatomical limit, which raises the obvious question of whether anyone at the scene was breathing normally either. What Jane's work actually overturned was the assumption that prey size functions as a reliable natural brake on python predation. Prior thinking held that large adult mammals were simply too big to be at serious risk. The gape data dismantles that. A 77-pound deer fits, barely, but completely. And Jane didn't stop at what already happened. He projected forward. Because if that python was near its ceiling, the ceiling itself is still unknown. The largest Burmese python ever recorded in Florida has almost certainly not been caught yet. What that means for Florida's apex animals is where this gets significantly worse. So, the gape data established a ceiling, but the ceiling is higher than anyone wanted to admit, and what lives beneath it is the part that reframes everything. Burmese pythons in Florida have been documented consuming white-tailed deer, adult alligators, and Florida panthers, not prey at the base of the food chain. Apex predators, animals that, in any functioning ecosystem, sit at the top and answer to nothing. An alligator that has ruled these wetlands for 200 million years, longer than birds have existed, is now documented inside a python's stomach. A Florida panther, one of the most endangered large cats in North America, with fewer than 200 individuals surviving, also confirmed as python prey. These are not accidental encounters. These are recorded outcomes. Jane's projection makes it worse. A python carrying a 30-centimeter gape, entirely plausible given Florida's uncatalogued population, could consume a 120-pound deer without reaching its anatomical limit. That number covers essentially every warm-blooded animal in the state. Nothing is definitively too large. Nothing is categorically off the menu. That is the actual reframe. The python isn't an invasive species disrupting a food web from below. It has inserted itself at the very top, above animals that had no evolutionary preparation for something like this. Which makes what the field cameras eventually captured feel less like a surprise, and more like an inevitability. So, the cameras were already out there. Weeks before the transmitter signals went cold, Bartoszek's team had deployed trail cameras across the same corridors where the juvenile pythons were moving. And this time, something walked into frame that nobody on the team had prepared themselves to see. What does footage look like when it rewrites everything you thought you understood about a place you had surveyed for years? Apparently, it looks quiet. The predator moves into position with the specific, unhurried confidence of an animal that has done this before, repeatedly, without witnesses, in a swamp that scientists had treated as a python monoculture, and then the python disappears. The word the team used afterward was unsettling. Not because the act itself was grotesque, though it was. Because of the implication embedded in the timing. This predator had been operating in the same geography, crossing the same trail camera zones, moving through the same hunting corridors as Bartoszek's researchers, and nobody had flagged it. Not once. The signal it left on their data was absence, 3 transmitters going dark, spines curled on an X-ray inside something unnamed. Now, it had a face, and here is what made the footage particularly difficult to process. The predator's gape, its body mechanics, its apparent comfort handling a full-grown Burmese python. These were not the attributes of an animal responding to opportunity. This looked like familiarity. Like a hunting pattern refined over time in a landscape, the field team believed they had mapped comprehensively. The footage didn't just identify an animal, it exposed a gap, not in the swamp, but in the survey itself. Something had been apex operating below the threshold of detection, invisible inside the very data that was supposed to catch it. If this predator had been here long enough to develop a python hunting pattern, what exactly were its numbers, its range, and its physical capacity? And why had no institution formally accounted for it? So, what exactly is this animal? The predator on that footage is an eastern indigo snake, Drymarchon cooperi, and if you've only ever heard that name in the context of conservation status, the profile it's about to reveal will land very differently. Native to the southeastern United States, the indigo is the longest snake species indigenous to North America. Adults routinely reach 8 feet. The largest confirmed specimens have pushed past 9. Their body mass is dense, muscular, built for subduing prey without constriction. They don't coil and squeeze. They bite, pin, and thrash their target into submission against the ground before swallowing it alive. And that distinction matters enormously. A Burmese python's primary defense is its own crushing coil. Against a constrictor, that strategy works. Against an indigo, which doesn't engage in a coiling contest, clamps directly behind the skull and physically overwhelms through grip strength and repeated slamming. The python's primary weapon becomes almost irrelevant. The Conservancy of Southwest Florida's research team noted that the indigo's attack pattern appeared highly efficient, suggesting this wasn't an experimental encounter. The prey species had essentially been pre-solved. Now, the gape. Unlike the jaw mechanics Bruce Jane documented in pythons, the indigo operates with a more conventional skull structure, but compensates through sheer approach. Juvenile pythons, like the radio-tagged animals the team lost, fall within a body diameter the indigo can manage cleanly. The X-rays showing intact python spines curled inside a digestive tract? That's not an accident of opportunity. That's a repeatable outcome. So why had no institution formally logged this predator-prey dynamic before the transmitters revealed it? Partly because indigo snakes are federally threatened, protected since 1978 under the Endangered Species Act, meaning research disturbing them requires specific permits, creating institutional blind spots in survey design. Partly because their range and the python invasion zone overlap almost perfectly. The predator had a profile all along. Nobody was running the search. Here's the thing about predators that reshape ecosystems. They rarely announce themselves. They were simply already there. The eastern indigo snake has been a documented Florida resident since naturalists first cataloged the state's herpetofauna in the early 20th century. It was present when the first pet trade pythons were released. It was present when breeding populations established themselves through the 1990s. It was still present when the USGS published its landmark mammal collapse data in 2012, and the conservation world finally grasped what Burmese pythons had done. Throughout that entire window, nobody drew a line between the indigo and the invasion. Part of that is structural. Federal protection under the Endangered Species Act arrived in 1978, 44 years before Bartoszek's team lost their first radio-tagged juvenile. Permits required to study a threatened species create friction, and friction creates blind spots. Researchers designing python surveys were not simultaneously designing indigo interaction studies. The two programs ran parallel, never intersecting. But here is the twist. The geographic overlap between indigo territory and the python invasion corridor is not approximate. It is almost exact. Two predators sharing the same ground, the same prey pool, the same remote swamp corridors for decades. One was being frantically counted, the other was being carefully avoided. That is not a data gap. That is a systematic failure to ask the right question. What wildlife managers do with that realization now? That is where the story gets genuinely complicated. The question wildlife managers are now openly asking is simple on its surface. Can this predator actually help? And the answer, typically for ecology, is it depends on things we have not fully measured yet. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and the National Park Service both recognize that biological control using native species is fundamentally different from introducing something foreign. The indigo is already here. It requires no transport, reintroduction risk, and no quarantine. That is the argument in its favor, and it is genuinely compelling. But what really makes this complicated is scale. Human-led python removal programs have pulled over 17,000 animals from the landscape by 2024. A staggering effort involving thousands of contractor hours, airboats, tracking dogs, and coordinated hunts. And python density in core Everglades habitat has barely registered a statistical response. The population simply regenerates faster than the removal rate. So the idea that a single native predator species, operating at natural population densities, could meaningfully suppress a self-sustaining population of 100,000 plus constrictors sounds appealing until you do the arithmetic, which someone, eventually, will have to do publicly. The harder constraint is unintended consequences. Eastern indigo snakes also consume native species, frogs, small mammals, lizards. Artificially inflating their numbers or concentrating them along python corridors could redirect pressure onto prey populations that are already fragile. Managing for one invasive crisis might quietly create another. Researchers are not saying abandon the idea. They are saying the question deserves a serious, funded, coordinated answer. Because right now, every option short of that is just buying time against a python population that has already proven it will not wait. One radio signal that refused to go silent has redrawn almost every assumption wildlife managers were working from. The Conservancy of Southwest Florida has already revised its field protocols. Transmitter recovery now triggers mandatory predator identification sweeps, a procedure that simply did not exist before December 2022. The University of Cincinnati team is recalibrating python population ceiling models to account for predation pressure never entered into prior estimates. And the National Park Service, which anchors the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan's 2035 targets around measurable ecosystem recovery, is facing an uncomfortable question. If a native predator has been quietly suppressing pythons for years without anyone noticing, what else is the current food web model missing? That is not a small revision. The SERP framework was built on a python trajectory that assumed unchecked growth. Even modest, unquantified predation pressure changes the math on mammal recovery timelines, which changes habitat restoration sequencing, which moves the 2035 milestones. What this footage changes at the deepest level is the working assumption that humans were the only meaningful check on the python population. They were not. Something else was already out there, doing the work before anyone thought to look. Science generally advances by answering questions. This one advanced by listening to a transmitter that should have gone quiet, and didn't. The snake that swallowed Florida's food chain whole is still out there. Bigger specimens almost certainly exist. USGS tracking continues, but funding gaps slow the response. Meanwhile, somewhere in Big Cypress, a python larger than the one Bartoszek filmed is waiting. If that unsettled you, the next video will finish the job.